Hello and namaskar. I wanted to start with a namaskar because this week's session and live is on Desi poets and the Desi poetry. So I want to start with namaskar because it is something very close to our roots. It reminds me of my heritage. It's something that I personally feel like evokes a response of respect and gratitude. Yes, let's add Yashu. So yeah, today's session live will be on Desi poets and Desi poetry. So I'm very excited to talk about this because this is a topic very near and dear to my heart. Okay, just making sure, Yashu, that this is working. I'm still not good at starting these lives. This is so rough. Oh, awesome. Hey, Yashu.
Hi.
Hey. What's up?
Hey, I am so happy to see you. You look beautiful.
Oh, thank you.
You're rocking that sweater.
Oh, yeah, it's kind of chilly in San Jose, which is usually not the vibe over here, so I was wearing my turtleneck.
Love
But
it.
but I was just explaining that, today's India Currents Desi Talk podcast will be on Desi poetry. So what does that mean? What are we talking about? I mean, of course, let's do our introduction. So you're
Hey everyone, I'm your girl Yashu Rao, plus model and confidence coach, and of course here as founder of hashtag Happy Yashu Coaching Services and columnist for India Currents, co-host for Desi Talk, coming to you guys every Tuesday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, and of course my amazingly beautiful,
oh,
knowledgeable co-host.
that's such a wonderful introduction. I'm Srishti Prabha, the managing editor at India Currents. If you're not following India.Currents, please do so. You can find my personal profile also at Problems. So let's get into Desi poetry. I think this is a really interesting topic, and I really hope people watch it because there's so much to talk about. And I just mentioned prior to you getting on that I started with Namaskar because that's something that for me, I also do Kathak. It's something that evokes a certain kind of energy and a response and a respect. And it's not namaste in bed and it's not namaste. It's not these appropriated versions of this. You can say namaste, namaskar is like more Bengali, I think, but for me, Namaskar, because my Kathak school uses Namaskar, so I want to start with Namaskar. Welcome to our podcast, and let's get into it. So we're going to talk a little bit about ancient uh, poetry, and then kind of go into like what modern day Desi poetry looks like. So, why are we talking about poetry? I mean, why don't you tell us a little bit about what poetry means to you and, what role it plays in your life?
Absolutely. And, I think that it's so important. And for those of you who enjoy poetry, this is a really, really great episode. So please use the arrow icon right here to send this video over to your guests and people who appreciate literature. We've got amazing literature and poems and just poetry writers, artists from the South Asian community. And today is a day to really honor and represent them with our episode. So please do take a minute to go ahead and invite people to join this live today. But for me, poetry is a form of expression. And for those of you who may know me, as a confidence coach, one of the most important things that I talk about in my journey even is self-discovery plus self-expression equals self-love. That's an equation that I have made for myself that I use in my company a lot of times. And I always say to people that, you know, journaling, poetry, forms of expressing oneself, one's thoughts, one's heart, emotions is so amazing. And growing up in a very Orthodox family where I grew up listening to ancient scriptures, which are consisting of poetry, whether it's about gods or goddesses or kings and queens or just people and nature. We see it all in ancient South Asian literature. So it's very near and dear to me. On top of that, my father is very, very knowledgeable. He's a scholar. So he has so many books in the house, poetry books that are like ancient. Like the pages are like very delicate. They date back to so far. They were passed down for him. And so this is a really near and dear topic to me, and I'm so honored. Honestly, I'm honored to be speaking of the great poets that we will be talking about briefly tonight. But yeah, this is a really special episode. I'm so excited. And how about you, Srishti? Because I know you write poetry as well. I wish I had the skills to do that. Sometimes I feel me just kind of talking. I like to articulate and express myself with very interesting descriptors, but I never considered myself a poet. But you are. And so I want to know, like, first of all, you know, your whole background, and then again, like what poetry means to you.
So one, I don't even want to say that I'm a poet because honestly, it's not like it's not like I'm, publishing my poetry or anything like that. I think everyone is a poet to some degree. It's like everyone's an artist. Everyone has the capacity to express themselves in a way that can resonate with another person. So, bar none, I am not at all a poet, but I write poetry because that's actually something similar to you. Actually, my dad is a scholar and he writes amazingly beautiful poetry in Hindi and in English. So he's like able to do it bilingually, which is actually very difficult now. As somebody that is more proficient, I would say in English than in Hindi, I've tried to write some poetry in Hindi, and it is very hard. Like I find myself struggling to find the right words. I don't know all the words. My vocabulary is limited, and probably if I spent more time, learning all the different words, I would get it. But it's hard because I also don't, my ability to read Hindi in language is slow. So there's all these limiting factors as to how I express myself versus expressing myself in English, which is much, much easier. So for him to be able to do them both is like incredible. But I will say my dad and my mom always encourage like writing and dancing and singing and all these arts. So because of that, I always just kind of tried everything out. So like I still do Kathak and I did singing for many years. And and then writing poetry is kind of a mix of both of those things. Because I mean, you kind of brought it up, like, we rely on songs and things like that to motivate us, to make us feel a certain way. And so what is that? Like, writing a song is poetry, and you see that in rap music. You see it especially in rap music because it comes from a space of struggle. It comes from a space of like trying to articulate what you're feeling and having others understand what that is. So I personally find that's all poetry is it's these words that just can communicate in a different way. So yeah, I mean, I'm not a poet, but I like writing poetry, and I think like I love listening to rap music. I love all kinds of spoken word. I like blues, jazz. I mean, I'm not limited in what I like. Songs are all poems, really. So I think I kind of explained myself, but the reason we're talking about this today, and I should have started with this, is because this month's theme for India Currents is on the colors of inclusion. So we're trying to talk about varied experiences, diverse voices, like what, as India is a multicultural, multilingual country. So it's not even just what I would like maybe resonate with is not even the same thing that you, Yashu, would, right? Because we come from actually different parts of India. So there's that even though I feel like it shouldn't matter too much, it matters because, like, for example, like you're, I believe, wait, are you a Brahmin caste? Not that matters, okay, because text being sent down for generations, that's very much a Brahmin tradition because they were the poets and the the people who had the knowledge. And then I come from a caste which didn't have that, so we don't have text, we don't have things like that passed down from tradition, from generation to generation, because it wasn't part of our narrative. So I think that's like an interesting point as well. But yeah, so colors of inclusion, and so we're going to talk about Desi poets. Some of them will be women, some of them will be men, but multilingual, multicultural, and yeah. So let's hear what ancient poets you brought here today.
Yeah, so I did a whole survey of ancient South Asian poems and poetry, and I really want to focus on the poets, right? I want to give shout outs to the poets because, I mean, they're literary greatness. I have to give them a shout out today. So I want to kind of go through a list, and I also want to talk about the types of poetry and classifications that we see when it comes to the South Asian culture. So, just going down the list, some of these people are very well known, right? So, giving a shout out to one of my most favorite, and most of you know him, Rabindranath Tagore. Rabindranath Tagore, referred to as the Bard of Bengal, right? And he is just a phenomenal poet. And I think his poetry was more the late 1800s going into the 1900s. So it was definitely, during a part of our history, which was very unique, if I can say. And the beautiful thing about him is that he was educated. So his work, y'all can find it in both Bengali and English, right? And not to mention, he composed the national anthems of India as well as Bangladesh. And then eventually he was the inspiration for the Sri Lankan anthem, national anthem as well. So,
Very cool.
Very cool,
It
right?
expands all over all these different like areas. That's awesome. Sorry, go
And he
ahead.
won the Nobel Prize for Literature for his beautiful books and poetry. So I definitely recommend you guys checking him out. Even if you just kind of Google Rabindranath Tagore, right? And Tagore is spelled Tagore. You'll be able to find that. And you were earlier talking about poets and writing in Hindi. I'm so proud that, like, the other day we had this like Indian celebration. I know I'm going a little off topic, but I have to, give a shout out here. And it was my aunt and uncle's like 50th wedding anniversary and everything. So his daughter, they all grew up in Nagpur in India. And so although I'm from South India and we speak Telugu, Telugu is our mother tongue, because she studied and like grew up in Nagpur, Hindi is like what comes to her. So her gift for her parents' 50th was she wrote beautiful poems in Hindi. And she said it in Hindi, and like as she was saying each like paragraph, she was translating it into Telugu as well, to the best of her ability, because she doesn't really speak a lot of Telugu either. And I can say probably half the crowd started crying. I started crying.
Oh.
It was so beautiful the way she just talked about it. And I have another very close friend here in Gainesville. She's originally from Delhi, born and raised from, small village, and, she's here now, and she writes Hindi poems. She loves writing. That's her thing. She always tells me like, Yashu, I'm trying to submit my poems somewhere. I want to see at least one of my poems submitted and published somewhere. And I always tell her like, don't give up. Like, just keep, because she writes beautifully. Very poetic. So I was just wondering, Srishti, do you think we should have like a poem submission so we can give like Insta story shout outs? If not on the India Currents page, if people send me your poems, I would be more than happy to like give you guys a shout out and honor you guys in your literary skills. So I don't know. I mean, Srishti, if that's something that, would be good, I mean, I think that would be really dope too.
Yeah, I mean, we definitely feature a lot of poets on our website, people that submit, and I find it like generally well written. I'll publish it because I think you're right. Like we're a community journal providing a space for voices and for people to like, even if it's not your best work ever, it's a place, it's a platform for you to grow and, you know, get feedback and get better. So yeah, I don't have a problem with in-language poetry. You just have to translate it also. But yeah, send her my direction. I think it would be awesome if anybody wants to write poetry and sends it our direction. That'd be great. Um,
So
but yeah,
now I
let's
have
keep,
my, yeah, so
go
the
ahead.
next poet that I want to talk about, and this person, we're looking at the 4th and 5th century AD, okay? So we taking it back, okay? And this particular poet is a Hindu poet, okay? So we see a lot of references to Hindu gods and goddesses, mainly goddess Kali, and that is Kalidasa, the great Kalidasa. So with his poetry, again, it's very spiritual scriptures, very descriptive of the goddess. And then also, he's best known for actually his playwrights, his play Shakuntala, as well as Raghuamsha. And I think there's one more that he did as well, but those are kind of his literary works that he did. And then he became more widely known to Western writers in the 18th century. And that's when his work really started to take an impact on Western literature, which I think is so interesting. But with Kalidasa, I think it's so interesting because there's a backstory. He was a very unlearned person. He wasn't educated, you know, he comes from this background, and then he kind of goes into this, you know, moment of almost like humiliation with, you know, a princess or something like that. Um, um, which basically in turn, you know, just had him in a space of going and praying to God. And then, you know, the
Mhm.
outcome of that was, you know, he became very learned. So that was my next shout out. The next
Well,
person. Mhm.
one thing I wanted to know with that is like you don't have to be a well-learned person to you know speak poetry, right? That's like a lot of old um ancient knowledge and things like that come from recitation of just stories and things that are happening. They don't have to be like educated, whatever educated even means, to be honest. People are
Yeah.
educated in their language, right? So I remember taking this class. This is so I took this class on African like literature and culture, and one of the things I remember that we focused on a lot was that for a nation that you know had so many languages, much like India, they were having to write in English, especially literature and especially poetry, because otherwise it wasn't being recognized elsewhere. And we were talking about like what is the benefit of writing for others if those within your own like community can't understand it. And there's like obviously pros and cons to both. I'm not saying there's one way of doing this. Like there is obviously a reason to write for a global audience so they can understand you, but there's always a reason to write for your own community because it's about them, it's for them. And so speaking in language, referencing things that like mean something, it's almost like an inside joke, right? It's like something that only you guys understand. And having that is like that's that's history. That's knowledge that will be passed down from generation to generation, much like how your dad has like a text that like, you know, you can't even touch it because it might crumble, that kind of thing. So it's wonderful to hear of like people that you know whatever learned and unlearned means, but like that they were pursuing that even though they were probably being
Right.
told like you don't know you don't know what you're talking about, you know.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that you brought this up. It's like the perfect lead into the next amazing poet, Tulasi Das, right? Who was also a Hindu poet. But for him, he's so interesting, right? He's very well known for some of his like very major works, like the Hanuman Chalisa, for people who may know what
Mm-hmm.
that is. But one of his scriptures, Rama Charita Manas, is super important because that was the only one that he decided not to write in Sanskrit. He's a Sanskrit scholar, but he didn't write it in Sanskrit. He wrote it in the Awadhi dialect, which is a Hindi dialect, for the sole reason that his story could then be accessible to the general public. And so he, you know, he said, and at the time, I think it was like Sanskrit speaking was kind of the elite
Hmm.
in some ways you can say. So the more common language, to be able to take a scripture and put it into that common language is a really major move. And that's why, like, for example, even in South India, Andhra, for example, we have people like the great Potana, who is an author who took Bhagavatam, Ramayana, not Ramayana, but Bhagavatam, and all of these different scriptures that were initially written by, say, Vyasa Bhagwan or whatever, and then he made it into colloquial Telugu so that people could understand it more.
Hmm.
Um, the next poet that I want to talk about, and now we're going to kind of shift to Urdu, right? Urdu in South Asia, we see a lot of Urdu and a lot of like Hindi, moving away from Hindi into kind of a different language scale. And we look at Urdu Shairi, okay? Urdu Shairi is a rich, like traditional form of poetry, and it comes in different contexts, it comes in different structure and patterns, okay? And so when we think of Shairi, we immediately think of Mirza Ghalib, okay? He was one of the most like prominent, amazing poets, and his lifespan is like from late 1700s into the 1800s, okay? So with him, he began writing at the age of 11. Okay, so I don't know what I was doing at the age of 11. I was definitely not writing poetry, but he was writing poetry. And fun fact, he was actually married by the age of 13. So you have to understand, like, even the cultural aspect of things and how it was different. Now, for his poetry, he's perhaps one of the most famous Indian poets out there, and the beauty of his work comes through with his Urdu shairi as well as Persian ghazals. And we see ghazals, again, a really major part of the South Asian culture as well. And so it's a certain structure that's introduced, and the beauty of the words that are selected. I personally love Urdu shairi, even just the way it sounds. And actually, I have one tatted on my back. Y'all can't see that, but
Oh,
I have it
what
tatted
is
on
it?
my.
What is it?
Oh gosh, I'm embarrassed to say. No, I'm kidding. It says "Aaj jaane ki zid na karo," right? And that's like one that everybody knows. It's very famous.
Hmm.
But even the words, right? Even the words are so beautiful when they're said. And so I'm
You want
very
to
passionate.
tell people what it means?
Absolutely. So, and this is okay, this is interesting too, because I was having a conversation with a friend recently about how it's very hard to translate a lot of like South Asian languages into English, because there's the transliteration is a little difficult. There's some words that we have that we don't have in English. So the rough meaning is today or tonight or in this moment, kind of, I request that you do not leave me. That's kind of the meaning in a rough way. And it's one of my most favorite lines. And that poem was later converted into a song. And it's very well known. It's a very well known line. But a lot of the shairi lines are beautiful. And I love the authenticity of the Urdu, which is why I had it tatted in Urdu. Um, I had it written out in Urdu. So, but yeah, so he is an amazing
I think it's
writer.
yeah, and I think the one thing that you didn't mention, which is important to mention, is Urdu, while it actually sounds very similar to Hindi. So like it has similar words like aaj jaane ki. I think zid might be the only really Urdu word in this sentence. Um, it's actually the language of people from Pakistan, of the diaspora. It's not actually necessarily the language that's well spoken all over India, but Urdu is generally the language of people that practice Islam. So because of that, they have their own way. They like, even things like a lot of their shairi will have Allah in their like in like their pattern of speaking and things like that. And I think it's very cool that India has this diverse, like it's multi-religious, multilingual, multi all these things. And so the fact that ghazals and shairi are part, unfortunately, the people are discriminated, but all of the art is really part of the culture. And so hopefully at some point we can move away from even discriminating the people in those ways, and recognizing like what they've brought us, which is like this beautiful spoken word. And also like with Shairi, I believe that they do these things where even in Hindi, like poetry reciting, they do this thing where they repeat every two or three lines. They'll repeat that line to create emphasis, which is something I haven't really seen in other poetry structures. I could only speak for English, but like the fact that they will stop literally every two lines and wait for a response to then start the next. So every two lines is like a punch. It's like you should like know, it'll be like something that you should be responding to. So I love listening to Shairi, and Shairi is very much part of our culture. So it's great that we're talking about, that we moved from like Hindu poetry to Urdu poetry to, Persian poetry. I mean, as someone that does Kathak, a lot of the stuff that we do is also influenced by Persian culture. So it's all like this. There's no one,
And
anyway,
so,
sorry, keep going.
With that being said, I just want to throw in one more, a personal favorite, and of course, in honor of Women's History Month, I cannot go without mentioning this amazing poet, Sarojini Naidu. She is known as the Nightingale of India. She began her writing career when she was 13. And she's also a political leader. So she had a pivotal role during the civil disobedience movement in India. So we had a lot of those things, but for her, hers was truly like poetic, work, a lot of romantic imagery in her poetry. So very beautiful quality work. And she got worldwide praise, for her amazing work. She talked about nature, she talked about love, she talked about death, she talked about patriotism, right? And that definitely led more into her political side as well. So she was also an amazing, amazing poet. And you mentioned Kathak, and I love the fact that you go back to your roots in that aspect. A lot of, for example, Hindustani, Carnatic music, a lot of the composers of these music pieces, right? Like great Sri Tyagaraja, Purandaradasa, all of these people.
Even Tulsi Das. Bharatanatyam is like heavily influenced by Tulsi Das, right? So go ahead.
No, absolutely. You're right on the mark there. So they are also considered poets, in their own sense. So it's amazing.
I think what we've come to is, what is poetry, right? Like poetry is everything, I think.
Everything.
Yeah, it's everything. It's anything that you can like, can evoke an emotion while you're speaking. Like you said, like your cousin's poetry made you cry. Like it was so powerful, right? And it's things like that's why people look to poetry. It's when you feel like you don't have the words, but there might be someone else out there that has them to like verbalize it in the right way,
And I have to say, there's so many more on this list. Like, for example, Kabir Das, who is revered by Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs. I mean, he is one of the most well-known and most, loved poets, right? So without a doubt, and there's so many more, right? There's so many more, Mahadevi Verma, there's so many more. But in the interest of time and just based off of my understanding and who I grew up with, right? I had to, mention a few. And now, now that we've talked about ancient poetry, I really want to talk about kind of like the transformation, like where are we now? We've come from a space, a country, a land, an area of the world, a continent of just beautiful artistry, right? And now, pushing forward, we've had people migrate to this country, taking some of those roots with them when they came to this country, which is why we're seeing such amazing poets and even Desi rappers, right? Like we see all of that just all mixing into one beautiful melting pot. So I definitely want to take a minute or two to, give a shout out to all of the poets out there right now. If you're out there doing your thing, shout out to you. And again, if you can, send us some of your poetry so we can give you guys a shout out and really honor you guys this month for the colors of inclusion. That is our theme at India Currents. But I'm going to hand it over to Srishti to talk about, you know, poetry and how it is right now. Right now.
Yeah, so poetry right now is it's addressing very different things. While back in the day, which kind of you went over, it was a lot of reverence for the gods, or it was love, and it was a lot of different things. Now we're talking about cultural identity, and I know they were talking about it then, but it's so different being in the United States and being Desi. So there is a vibrant community of Desi poets, and I've learned that actually over the course of my 1 year, 1.5 years at India Currents, that oh my God, there's these people talking about everything from Black Lives Matter to immigration to uncertainty, change, all these things. They're speaking to all minority voices, and it was so inspiring. I remember the first Desi poetry reading we had was on women in activism. And so it was around the time of George Floyd's death, and we wanted to, talk about it, have like a conversation, like what does that mean for us as minorities to support, the movement of Black Lives Matter, or all minorities that are being subjected to this kind of, persecution. So we had some amazing poets, female poets, talk about this. And so I actually want to read out a poem from a few of the poets that have attended our poetry readings. The first one is from Zilka Joseph. She is a Pushcart Prize nominee, and her work has been featured in many, many, many literary magazines and publications. And so we're very lucky that, she came. And I want to say these were all Matvala poets, so they're specifically of Desi origin. They were curated by the Matvala women, which are Usha, Kayla, and Pramila Venkateswaran. They're very, very, just such insightful women, and they've created this amazing organization. So I'm going to read the first poem by Zilka. It's called Havan. Havan is a sacrificial fire used for Hindu ceremonies. You might have seen it sometimes at a wedding. It's in the center. This poetry is actually written in the formation of like a fire flame. You can't see it, but I wanted to mention that. So I'm going to read. It's very cool. So I'm going to read it. He got angrier, they lifted. The blue plastic can from the kitchen floor my hand, Huldy streaked. I cried out. I backed away, ran toward the bedroom. The old lady held on to my sari balav, pulled me hard, and she was 70, but she was 70, but she was strong. I could see her beetle-stained teeth close to my face, blood red, yellow bone, cage door opening, fingers like steel hinges, creaking. Krishna, Krishna, pay my dowry. Oh, Krishna, I have no children, murmuring in the peepal trees, rain of thin glass, bangles breaking, mouth full of kerosene, generous as love, blue god flesh, on fire like sindoor in my hair easily, caught like ghee and grain, eaten whole, taken it all. O witness, union divine, no holy Ganga water, no sweetness like jasmine or sandalwood, this burning, this flame, eternal. Obviously, I cannot do justice to how she would have read this poem, but I wanted to read this one specifically because it had elements of our culture, of like words and phrases we could recognize, and I think that's so important. I don't know, what did it evoke for you, Yashu?
It made me think about the oppression on Indian women, being forced into, for example, marriages or certain situations. That's how I felt about it. I felt very strongly, especially like bangles breaking, actually, one of the lines I really liked was Haldi streak on my hand. Immediately, like that vision, Haldi is turmeric. So the minute, I saw, it's very image, it was invoking the imagery. So that, I saw that. I was a little like, where is this going? What's about to happen? It made me feel that way. But, ooh, that was,
Yeah, I think it's like a very interesting poem because havans are so holy and so pure, and they're supposed to symbolize like birth and all these like good
Right,
things. But
rejuvenation,
the
greatness,
right,
and happiness, right? And this is
but the
like,
poem is like it brings you down. Like you feel the negative energy to some degree of what this person is trying to make you feel
pain,
of like
pain.
yeah,
I
pain.
was at my, like, I was listening. I was just like, wait, is she about to like jump into this fire? Is she about to set herself on fire? Like,
Yeah.
like that means she's in incredible pain, So, woo, this is a
Yeah.
dark one.
It's a dark one, but I really like I love
Beautiful.
Zilka Joseph too because she's just it has such a way with words and the way that even it's just laid out on the paper is just I know I couldn't even do justice because I was trying to follow the words on the paper because they're like going back and forth. But
I
it's
like also the line that she talks about the betel stained. Betel is a type of,
beetle, yeah,
is
betel
it,
beetle. Sorry, yeah,
yeah, I thought it was pronounced betel, but
I have no idea.
it's a leaf that we have, in South Asia, and traditionally you put some spices in it, you wrap it up, and then you eat it. So it's used kind of as a way of cleansing your mouth, but not really cleansing it because you're
It's
really eating
tobacco. It's
it.
bon. Bon is tobacco. It's just like it's chewing tobacco, but it's like I personally, it stains your whole mouth with red, and you have to
Yeah.
spit it out consistently. I find it really gross, but it is very common in India. Very, very
Mhm.
common. So yeah, you're
It
totally right. Like
cleans
if,
out your palate, right? Like after you eat, people typically do it to clean out their palate, and then also
yeah.
supposedly to help with digestion. I don't really know about that, but
I mean, to each their own. I'm not judging. Like
no, not at
if you
all.
like it, you like
In
it. But
fact, in our like Indian, again, old ancient Indian scriptures, goddesses like goddess Parvati, when they described her form, they had described that she has a red tongue because she's chewing betel leaf in the back of her tongue.
ooh,
So betel leaves
that's
people just eat betel leaves to clean their palates. When they add the tobacco in there, it's like a whole nother level.
yeah.
But
Okay,
people
okay.
traditionally can also just pick the leaf and they'll put it in their mouth as a way of like cleansing. But that's
Yeah. I
that.
think like yeah, it's very good that you corrected me because I actually didn't I didn't it evokes the imagery it's evoking for you is so different than the one it's evoking for me where it's like old Indian men at like a sari shop just like spitting it into like a they'll be like chewing it and then spitting it.
It's
Yeah,
very
fun, exactly.
good.
Like into like into like a
Right.
cup or something, and I'm like, oh my God, your saliva and spit and everything. And with COVID right now, I'd be like, please keep that
Hell
away
no!
from me.
Hell no! Oh
But you're
hell
totally right. There is a type of pond that I believe doesn't have tobacco, and
no!
like
The leaf is
evoke.
sacred. When we, like, for example, get married, you always give, like, for example, you give your in-laws or you give people the leaf because the leaf is considered sacred. The pan is the tobacco, which is more like
That's
new
true.
age. But that was good. Can you read another one?
Yes, I get. Yeah, I like how excited you are about this. I'm excited
I'm,
now. Okay.
we got
So the
some
next person
comments here. We got some comments
oh,
here from
oh yeah.
Danu, who is our
Maybe you're
guest.
talking about the spitting of the pond, dude. I
Oh
know.
God, our commission drivers are always spitting, are chewing
They're
fun
like
and then spitting it.
they are doing the hardest work. The hardest work. They're like biking away with people on their back while spitting pond off the side of the rickshaw, which is insane. I'm truly shocked. Okay. Let me talk about the next poet a little bit. So Kalpana Singh Chitnis was in one of our poetry readings. She is the editor-in-chief of the publication Life and Legends. Again, her poems and translations are in multiple publications. Um, and she's also the recipient of the Bihar Shri and Rajiv Gandhi Global Excellence Award. So that to me was interesting because I'm Bihari, so I had a little connection with her where it's like, okay, she's coming from this like specific space. So okay, I'm gonna read her poem. It's not actually very Bihari, but I want to read the poem to you. It's called
And
The
are
Salt of
all
the
of these in English or were they in another language and then they were translated?
So good question. These are all in English. I picked the ones that were in English, because some of the ones that weren't were in like Telugu and Tamil and Hindi, and I actually can't read Telugu or Tamil or any other language other than Hindi. So I didn't want to like
Of course.
I didn't have the time to transliterate it. So I was just like, okay, I'm gonna pick the ones that were in English and are also like I think that speaks a little bit to as Indian Americans or South Asian Americans to some degree we aren't, as fluent in the language. So it's our even though we connect with the identity, we're speaking to a lot of it in English. And so that's why I also kind of picked English speaking ones. So okay, so this poem's called The Salt of a Woman. Here she goes down, again, like a tree, bark naked, her flowers stolen, fruits eaten, tongue clipped, and vagina axed. Every stem of her body oozes the salt of a woman and her tears, like the ancient rivers of her land. Her story is much older than her civilization, invaded and plundered, conquered and gifted, questioned and blamed, dismissed and shamed, over and over and over again.
You pick some dark ones.
I think maybe I'm in a mood. I don't know. I did pick some dark ones. But I will say the themes that we had were kind of evocative in that specific way because we had like themes like immigration, activism, protesting, like political, divides and things like that. Yeah, so it was like very a lot of the stuff that was written was coming from that space. And also they were all written in 2020, I believe. So they were all written in a space of like COVID. And if not, I mean, even then doesn't matter. It's still from a place of like hurt and pain. But yeah, this one is a hard one to hear for sure.
Is this about, could you, I don't want to make you read it again, but can you read the part where she talks about the line where she talks about the body parts? I know, like where, I think you know which part.
Every stem of her body oozes the salt of her woman and her tears, like the ancient rivers of her land. Is that the
the lines right before that?
Okay. Here she goes down again like a tree, bark naked, her flowers stolen, fruits eaten, tongue clipped, and vagina axed. That part.
Yeah. So just like processing that, my mind is going to rape. That's kind of where my mind went. I know, like we have, and for people who may not know, again, flowers, the symbolism there. Many Indian women, we wear flowers in our hair, and so a lot of times when we're seeing kind of like people being like pushed into situations, we see flowers being ripped out of hair, and things like that. So for me, that was the visual that kind of struck me. Another way to see it is death. When a woman's husband dies, they kind of strip her of her, feminine qualities. So they'll remove her bindi, they'll remove her hair, they'll break her bangles. And those are like, as a married woman, you are wholesome, so you adorn yourself with all of these things. But if your husband dies, for example, you're removed, you're stripped of these things. So I don't know, again, where the author is coming from or what this poem is about, but just hearing it, the imagery that was the imagery that my mind kind of went to. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is actually about, from my memory, so I have to like remember, obviously we can't be sure of the author's intent, but I think it's about India's daughter. So I believe she had mentioned that because some of the poets had written about that. But even if it's not, I do think it's symbolic of like how women's bodies are viewed globally and in India, how, like their flowers are something to be stolen, and their fruits are something to be eaten, and their tongue is something to be clipped. Like those are things, that's like imagery that's like saying like this is definitive, right? But I love how it ends where like, well, I don't love how it ends, but I love that she says like her story is much older than her civilizations. Like this is the story of all women. It's not just a story of being South Asian in this in India or whatever. It's like this is the story, and it happens over and over again, ends over and over again, and like they're consistently questioned and blamed and dismissed when they try to come forward, and it is a very common trope, and it happens even to this day. So yeah, I love that, you know, even just the name of the poem and like how she builds it in, like Salt of a Woman, like it just makes you feel a certain way. It makes you feel like, oh, like this is of her. This is of her, and it's something from her that we're like taking and giving and whatever. Like it's just so profound. I don't know in what how to otherwise verbalize it, but that's what
Right.
poetry can do. It can make you feel a certain way that you might not be able to like actually express, right?
We want to hear what our viewers have to say too. So if y'all are tapped in and y'all are listening, please drop your comments below. Let us know, what emotions are these poems evoking? You know, what is this making you think? What are you feeling? I think the greatest thing about poems is that they're interpreted differently for every person who reads it. So we want to know what y'all are thinking. So be sure to comment below in the comments. Let us know. Do you have another one that you wanna read for us?
Oh, I have so many. I actually picked like five, and now I'm seeing that the time is like 6:47. So I don't know. What do you think? How many more do you want to hear?
I want to hear one more that is not yours, and then I want to hear one that is yours.
Okay, let's hear one that's not mine. I ended up reading all women because I really liked all of the women. I like the men's poetry too, but I think I resonated probably the most with the women who wrote.
Right.
So please discount, like, it's not that I'm saying that men's poetry is not, you know, as beautiful and as evocative. I think I just ended up with the ones that I chose were this way. I picked this poet, Geeta Sukumaran, because she actually writes in Tamil, and her poems are translated, and then she'll read the translated version as well. So she is a doctoral student at the Humanities Toronto York University. She's public she's published two books in Tamil, and she's translated Sylvia Plath's poems into Tamil. So that's a pretty
Wow.
interesting thing to like to actually flip the narrative on its head and do it, you know, the other direction. So I'm gonna read you her poem. It's called A Conversation. I picked this poem because it's actually not about being South Asian, and maybe you'll pick up on it while I read it. The woman tending the garden terrace at my place of work told me her wages for watering unfamiliar plants while collecting her memories in an unaccustomed English. As bombs fell, dust that rises up from people scattering, penetrating my eyes, obscuring the path. Treading through the midnight darkness, we reached a shelter. In the oilless pan rosemary cooks with sunberry leaves I had found between the crevices of the cement wall. I exchanged curry leaves with flour to nurture our lives which refused to yield, she continued, her fingers covered with pot soil. The ground grabbed from my feet, that cannot be reclaimed by anyone, clings to the roots of my spinach stalks and herbs swelling in my palm. As her wringing hands and moist eyelashes uncover the rest of her experiences, lines of water descended from the sky, while my heart mellowed, forgetting the pain momentarily, trying to make a poem about the smell of rain that is the same across the earth. Drenched in the rain, walking past me, she said, the smell of a new cement and aluminum sheets that drink water is the same in all cities as they become home to refugees. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting because it's from her perspective, speaking to somebody who we don't actually know where that person is from. It's an
But it seems
unknown,
like
but they're,
we know that person too. Like I feel like I've bumped into that very person. I mean,
yeah.
immediately it made me think of, the people who work as custodians or people who work in my department who might be immigrants, who might be from different minority groups, and I like the part they talk about the wage when she talks about wages, like that really, like, it's an emotion that I feel all the time when I see people, and I like this one.
Yeah, I like that it's like a conversation that she's having with someone and trying to understand like what they're talking about, but also like probably to some degree empathizing and also understanding like, hey, this is kind of similar to mine. The line, the ground grabbed from my feet that cannot be reclaimed by anyone, that line has stuck with me. I don't know why. It's like it feels as though like no matter where you go, like the ground is mine. Like I am here and this is where I am. So like you can't take that away from me. And also you can't take away where I've come from. So it's kind of just this like, I don't know. It's just very universally like I like that it has a universal tone, like we're together in this and that we actually are in the same rain and in the same season and the same emotion. I can't even verbalize what I'm trying to. I feel so many emotions listening to these poems that it's like overwhelming.
Love it, love it. And now, guys, the moment you've been waiting for, we're gonna listen to Srishti's own beautiful work. I'm so excited. This is the moment I've been waiting for.
I know. I don't think anybody else has been waiting for this
If y'all are excited to hear Srishti's amazing poetry, go ahead and drop an emoji, drop a heart in there, do something. We gotta show some love for my co-host people. Go ahead and drop some love down there. Let's get some loving here. I'm excited. I cannot wait. I cannot wait. Go ahead and drop some love, people. Let's get it.
Okay. Oh my God, Vanu. I think he's the only one. It's okay. Thank you, Vanu, for staying on for almost an hour. You're a real OG.
Turtle Bandit. Turtle Bandit has been here the whole time.
Oh my God, that's my friend Shelby. Hey, Shelbs. That's awesome.
Thank you. Look at Daniel. I love Daniel's support and energy. He's amazing. I'm telling you guys. Go follow my friend DT Daniel 1997. He was a guest speaker here. Y'all can find his amazing interview on India.Currents, pinned in the comment. Be sure to check it out. But guys, the moment we've all been waiting for.
Oh my God. You really hyped this up now if it's not good enough. I'm worried.
It's going to be beautiful. Stop.
Okay. Well, all right. So I come from a place of a lot of feelings. So this is not a positive or uplifting poem. I just want to make that clear. Okay. Turmoil within and turmoil without. I see that the bubbling, boiling water and my stomach churns. Chai heals all wounds, they say. I am resigned to my fate and guilt and shame. Regression at the tip of their tongue, along with the jeera, kali mirch, and namak in the chutney that I made. That same mouth, sweet and sour. What an awful combination. I wonder who came up with that. Probably the same people who expect my identity to pillow my servitude. It's short and sweet.
Wow, yo, that was good.
Did you like it?
I love it. And listen, I just love the metaphor that you drew there. She's talking about the sweet chai mixed in with this namak, right? So it's like sweet and salty is what we got going on here. This combination, and then she brings it. She throws the metaphor to herself and her identity. Can you read that bottom part one more time, please?
Yeah. Oh my God. I feel so like it's so empowering to have somebody like read it to somebody and then have them. That's like a big part of poetry, is like having someone receive it and be like, whoa, that's like actually really wonderful to hear.
It's the relatability. I have to say this. The other poems you were reading, they were beautiful, they were deep, they were dark. But this poem, it's a relatability that I'm able to, like, this is something that I would take and I would post on my page because I'm feeling this way. It's evoking an emotion within me because it relates to me. So yes, people want it again on popular demand. We want it from top to bottom, one time.
Okay, but I want to say, so I think we've actually spanned like so many generations of poetry in the span of what we've just done, because we started with ancient poetry, and the modern poetry that I read is actually by people who are a little bit older than me, because they're like well-renowned published poets and have been doing this work for a while. So I am a little bit, like, I'm actually not a published poet. I don't read my poetry for people. This is actually an exclusive for just Yashu, because I was like, all right, you know what? I will do this for my girl, because I feel like you will relate to what I write. But it's also a little scary to like put yourself out there and be like, okay, I just, this is something that I wrote. So thank you. I really appreciate you and your response.
And this is not, I'm not saying this because you're my friend, but that was really quality work. I'm going to text you after this live, okay? Because I genuinely think this was quality work. And clearly our viewers are loving this. So go ahead, Srishti.
Yeah, okay. So it's untitled. I think I kind of named it Home. Not sure what I want to call it yet. So here it is. Turmoil within and turmoil without. I see that the bubbling, boiling water in my stomach churns. Chai heals all wounds, they think. I am resigned to my fate and guilt and shame. Regression at the tip of their tongue, along with the jeera, kali mirch, and namak in the chutney that I made. What the same mouth, sweet and sour. What an awful combination. I wonder who came up with that. Probably the same people who expect my identity to pillow my servitude. Here's the thing. Also, the fact that I'm making chai in this for somebody else, that's what makes me also angry. You know what I mean? Like, they expect me to be making chai all day, every day, but it's like, why don't you make your own goddamn chai? Somebody else can go make their own chai. I don't need to make this chai.
I I really love the usage of the word pillow. I love the placement of that. I love
Hmm.
how you're taking the viewers up, and then by using the word pillow, you're bringing it
Bring
down,
it
like,
down.
but and the pillow is giving it that imagery.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of
I'm
how
just
I feel like, you go through this range of emotions. I My parents aren't like this really. Like they love chai, so like they'll ask anybody that's around them to make them chai because that's like they don't want to do it themselves. And also I agree with Vanu. I could also go for some good chai, and thank you, Shelby, for your kind words. But it's like this process of like, okay, I'm gonna get up and make this chai, and I'm like angry about making this chai because like, why am I making it? Because a lot of times you go to India or you go other places, they expect women to serve this chai. They
right.
expect women to be the ones feeding, the ones to be doing. And if you're good, if you don't do that, you're not a good Indian girl. You're not like a good representation of your family. There's like so many implications to doing these things. And like when you go to weddings, it's like women are waiting hand and foot on everybody. I'm like, why am I doing this? Like, I
Right.
don't even get it. But I mean, this is layered. This isn't just about
I was
making
about to
chai. It's like,
say, it's like it's the interpretation, right? So I like how for the like the in the way you wrote it, it's about you getting up making chai, and I saw that part. Now for me, I was more picking up on, I didn't even see the part that you were getting up and making chai. All I saw was the fact that you got chai, and then you have this like namak thing going on, and then the part where you said like ew, who came up with this system, and then probably the same people who are expecting the servitude. For me, that hit identity crisis, like that
mm-hmm,
hit being Indo-American, right? Being in that mix, in, like, of, okay, hold on, like my parents are expecting one thing of me, but they're also kind of hypocritically expecting something else.
yes,
It's That's the
it's
part that,
all of that. It's
yes,
all of that. I
yes,
really wrote
girl.
this. I really wrote this, and here's the real story. I wrote this when I was really angry at my parents one day. And sometimes, good word comes out when you're upset. I cannot lie. But I remember being very mad about something. I don't even know what that thing is anymore. That's the funniest part. All I know is I was very upset. And I was like, I need to write something down right now.
Right,
Because that's the only way I'll feel better. And then
right,
I did, and I was like, all right, sometimes it's not quality work, I will say, but at least some of it, like, I'm like, okay, like I can go back to how I felt, and sometimes I mean, we've been talking about people resonating with, how you're feeling now, but like it's also like how you felt. Like it's nice to
mhm,
know, like, okay, I don't feel this way anymore. Like I'm making active decisions or I'm doing things in my life to not feel that way. And this was a moment in time where I felt this horrible, or I felt this angry, or I felt this
right.
upset. And now it's cathartic to read it right now. It's actually cathartic to be like, okay, I've released some of that, like,
And that's the
emotion,
magic,
right?
right? That's the magic of poetry. Again, going back to that self-expression and just getting it out of your system, in a way that's going to be almost therapeutic, right?
Hmm.
And I think that's beautiful. Now, before our live gets shut off, because I know we've done the full hour, I don't want the
Yeah.
time to go off. The time's gonna go off on us soon. I do want to say thank you all for tapping in. Thank you, and shout out to our amazing poets who were featured tonight on our episode. Even the ancient ones who may not be here, but in spirit, they're living in their artwork right now. And again, thank you so much, Srishti, for compiling all of this. And hopefully we'll be able to share some of this work. And if you guys are poets, you want to share your work, be sure to DM India.current or myself, yeah, the Yashu Rao or Srishti, Prabha Lems. Our handles are tagged right here in the pin. And we will do everything we can to get you guys a shout out, share it on our Instagram, Insta stories, or whatever it is that we got to get done there. But be sure to join us for the rest of the month. Colors of Inclusion. Srishti, you want to wrap us up?
You already did such a good job. Please tune in next week. We'll have a person we'll be interviewing, and she's kind of, gaining some prominence in the literary world. So it'll be exciting to hear from her. That's all I have to say. Thank you so much, Yashu. It's so wonderful to have somebody like you co-host with me. It's always like such a safe space, and I always have such a good time. So thank you for all your work. And
my energy is like glowing right now. Like I'm feeling so full. My heart is full. And it's because like I think when we share art, and that's the magic of like poetry and literature and artwork and everything, you leave with an experience, a really nice aftertaste almost. So thank you, Srishti. I loved it.
Of course. Also, thank you, Shelby, for the very wonderful comment. I'm glad that hopefully you can come and teach us something sometime if you want. All right, I will talk to you guys next week. Bye, Yashu.
Bye, guys.